Welcome everyone. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. This is Four Women, Four Decades, and we're delighted to be with you this evening or morning, daytime, wherever you're calling from, for a fresh conversation about stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. I don't know how many of you were able to attend our first introductory call that we did a few weeks ago around our life lessons. But if this is the first time you're dialing in to see us, then my name is Natalie King, and I am joined by Rachel, B, and Rebecca, who you'll get to see later as we progress into this call. Just for a bit of heads up, B and Rebecca are mother and daughter duo, so you'll get to hear a little bit about their story when we move to them. So just, I guess, a tiny bit of housekeeping first. We're going to be sharing for the first half, or just slightly more than the first half of this call, our experience when it comes to stress, anxiety, and overwhelm, and what we've learned that has been immensely helpful to ourselves and the people we work with. And there will also be a chance for your questions during this call. The chat function is going to be closed for the first half, and then we'll signpost halfway through when the chat function opens. And I guess this will be your cue for anything that's on your mind or any questions you have to comment in the chat, so we can capture those, and hopefully for part of this call we'll have a chance to speak to some of those questions directly to give you some specific support in any areas that you're dealing with. Just to manage kind of background noise and everything, we'll be keeping everyone on mute for the call, with the exception of the four of us. And we just want to acknowledge the challenging circumstances that are at play at the moment, and whatever's going on for you at the moment, then we hope that you will find something during this hour that will be of help and allow you to navigate this situation we're in with a bit more ease, and hopefully leave the call feeling a little bit lighter. A fresh conversation about stress. So why fresh? Why fresh? So typically, in terms of stress, there are two mainstream kind of schools of thought or way people understand it. The first one we might encounter is stress avoidance, where we will go out of our way to avoid situations that we find stressful, which isn't massively helpful when we come into tough situations that we can't avoid. But that is one way we just kind of will avoid situations that we find stressful. The other, which you'll all know about, is stress management. And there is an extensive library of tools and guides and techniques and step-by-steps to manage this thing called stress and overwhelm and anxiety. And they can be really helpful. They can be really, really helpful. What we're pointing to in this hour, in this conversation, and for what me, Rachel, B, and Rebecca have all found really helpful in our journeys, dealing with our own personal stresses and times of overwhelm, is a slightly different direction. And it's not avoiding stress, it's not managing stress, but it's rather just reflecting on our relationship with stress and when we're experiencing those type of emotions, and recognizing that we can have a different relationship when those feelings show up. And that's what we're going to cover in a bit more depth in this hour. So hopefully you'll get we'll be able to bring that to life a little bit about what that means. And I invite you to listen with an open mind and open ears and open heart, because some of the things we talk about might just seem a little bit different or contrary to your way of viewing the subject. And you'll get more out of this hour just by listening from an open place, as opposed to trying to make sense of it all. Just kind of listen as if you were listening to music, and see what occurs to you to be true. And before I kind of hand out to the others, I just wanted to share one kind of thing that underpins everything that we're going to be talking about, and that is how our experience of reality in every moment is coming from the inside out. And so what do I mean by that? It means that our experience in any moment is always occurring as a result of the thinking we have and the feelings then that we have in relation to those thoughts. And that then creates our experience that crops up in any moment. It's happening now and it always happens. And that's the way it works. And this is a bit of an insight into how the mind works, how human beings tick. And in times of challenge, it really feels that what is happening outside of us and our circumstances are making us feel a certain way. But when we unpick what's actually happening, it's our thoughts in relation to those circumstances that are creating our version of reality. And that's why during this pandemic, you will have experienced all sorts of emotions, ranging from anger and grief and denial and sadness, and way across the spectrum, ranging to extreme gratitude and happiness. And there's space for it all. And it's not the outside that's causing us to feel a certain way. It's always our thinking in relation to the circumstances that creates our experience. So we're going to bring that to life a little bit more in that call, but I wanted to kind of set the tone for some of what we're going to be talking about. And stress, therefore, and anxiety, therefore, and overwhelm, therefore, is as a result of our thinking in the moment in relation to the circumstances we face. So to talk a bit more about what this experience of stress, overwhelm, or anxiety might look like for any one of us, I'm going to hand over to Rachel to tell us a bit more.
Thank you, Natalie. Good evening, everyone, or good morning. So we as a four discussed all of the ways that when we're having stressful thoughts or when we're in the middle of that overwhelm and anxiety, what's happening? How does that show up in our day-to-day life? And what examples can I share with you that makes that real? And I was thinking about my own experience, and when I shared this with the other ladies, then we kind of all agreed that this is possible for a lot of us. So I hope it makes sense to some of you. But when I'm stressed or feeling overwhelmed or feeling anxious, there's certain things that happen without fail every time. So I'll know I'm on my way to some pretty unhelpful thinking, or I'm already experiencing unhelpful thinking. What happens is I get snarky and a little bit more sarcastic. I notice that I lose patience, or in most cases I have no patience. And recently I even caught myself, and some of you might smile at this one, I caught myself even in the middle of a door slam, and I slammed a door, and then I'm surprised when my 7-year-old slams a door at me. So it's quite interesting what happens for me when I'm stressed. But in my experience, I tend to verbalize it. So I will know that I'm stressed or overwhelmed or anxious because I will be saying things out loud. I'll be overly critical. I'll be a bit more snarky, and it's a side of me that I don't like. But when I'm having that experience, I can't very easily snap out of it, but I know that it's some of my warning signs to show that, my thinking isn't helpful about the circumstances, and I'm reacting to my circumstances by being more sarcastic, by being more snarky. And as we were sharing our own experiences, B experiences it differently to me, but we noticed that, I've experienced panic attacks in my life. And so at that point, I couldn't really control my body physically. But the majority of cases with me, the stress and anxiety will come out of my mouth. You'll know because I'll tell you. And B, I think it was different in your case.
Yeah, it's so interesting how people can experience, I guess, the same emotion, the same feeling, but in very different ways. So for me, it's kind of the opposite. Like I kind of internalize those feelings, and I tend to go very quiet. So instead of the slamming of the doors, it'll be me kind of shrinking away from the world. I think mum is quite similar as well, that we're quite similar in that way. Maybe it's a kind of inherited thing. But what I also find is that I have a lot of very kind of physical symptoms that go alongside that. So kind of racing heart, churning stomach, the clammy palms that go with that. So it's almost like I can very much feel that adrenaline, the kind of fight or flight response being activated in me, and I can very much kind of feel that. And it can be pretty exhausting when you're kind of constantly in that fight or flight response. Like, I think you're meant to only activate that response kind of for 30 minutes every 72 hours, but I used to feel anxious all the time. I kind of went through a period in my life of probably about 2 years where I just felt anxious and stressed all the time, and I wondered why I was getting ill all the time. But because I had all these kind of toxins constantly coursing through me. But I would, for like a good kind of solid 2 years, I would feel stressed and anxious about work all the time. And I'd kind of live for the weekends, and then when it got to the weekend, I'd panic about Monday coming around. So there was kind of no rest from it, and so it kind of totally overshadowed everything in my life at that time, and it felt like it was following me everywhere. Like, I'd be on holiday, I remember so clearly sitting on a beach. I can't remember where I was, but I was sitting on a beach and beautiful sunshine, and I was panicking about work, which was hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. So I was kind of keeping this anxiety alive in my mind, and then being totally frightened by it constantly. And to me at that time, it really looked like it was work that was causing it. It was the meetings, the people, my inbox, my overflowing inbox. And so I would end up avoiding anything that I thought might make it worse. So giving presentations or going to big meetings. But although avoiding those things would give me a kind of temporary relief, actually it didn't really help. Avoiding those, I guess a lot of people call them triggers, it didn't actually help. And I was saying this to Mum earlier, that I even ended up avoiding watching TV programs that involved workplaces, which is just mad. Like, my boyfriend, he loves The Office, and I would just refuse to watch it with him because it would remind me of work. So I was so caught up in this whole experience of anxiety. And what I wasn't seeing at the time, which obviously hindsight is a wonderful thing, but what I didn't see at the time was that it wasn't actually the work or the meetings or the people or the inbox or whatever it is that was making me anxious. It was the story that I had made up and was really believing about feeling totally incompetent. And that was what was scaring me. I was petrified of not being good enough. And I carried that fear everywhere with me. Like I said, even on holiday to the kind of far-flung corners of the world. But it was everywhere, and it was my entire life. But for me, the turning point was once I really saw, and like really saw, that I didn't have to buy into that story anymore. That was when the anxiety just kind of faded away, almost on its own. I didn't have to kind of white knuckle my way through kind of fighting and managing my stress and anxiety. So that was the turning point for me. But it's obviously worth saying that, like, I still get nervous and anxious now and again, but I think what's changed for me is that I don't fear that feeling anymore, and we're going to talk a bit more about that later on. But I don't fear that feeling when it comes along, and I just know now not to take my thinking quite so seriously when I'm in that state of mind, because I know that I'm in kind of dangerous territory, as it were, that my thinking isn't helpful. So that's kind of my experience, and I know that Mum, you certainly, well, you were there, and I've kind of experienced a lot of anxiety throughout my life. So you've certainly seen that from a parent's perspective, being on the end of the phone.
Well, it's interesting because what comes to mind most of all is when you were at university and you had such a fear for exams. And I remember the times that you would be leaving your house to walk to wherever you were doing your exam, and we would be on the phone the entire time. I was trying to bring you down so that you could actually, I mean, you were hysterical a lot of the time. And how different that is now. And I know, we've had conversations about you when you were stressed at work and everything, and now we don't have those kind of calls anymore, which is so different. And it's so wonderful when you can, the freedom that you gain from actually having, a different perspective on stress, anxiety, and where it's coming from. So I wanted to talk a bit about my experience, which for me was, when I was thinking about this, what I really struggled with was overwhelm. And I guess for me, what that was that I used to get great big tsunamis of feelings. And like B says, and they really scared me. And it was like I questioned everything in my ability. Was I a good enough mother, a wife, daughter, friend, all of that? And, why did everything seem so hard? Why did others seem to cope and I couldn't? Should parenting really be this hard, or should marriage be this difficult? And why did living sometimes feel so overwhelming? And those were just, and it was like a tsunami. And, as they've said, I live right by the sea. And sometimes when the sea is really wild and you feel this big wave coming towards you, that's what it felt like for me. And my reaction to that was that I would try and numb in any way that I could. I didn't want to feel those feelings. And because I was so frightened of them. So what that numbing looked like was me being small. It meant me hiding. I wore sunglasses all the time because I didn't want people to see into my eyes. And one of, hiding was me running away from this torrent of thoughts in my head. And the result of that for me, and this is only something I've kind of really thought about recently, is that depression, which I suffered on and off for about 10 years of my life, was my way of powering down. It was my way of numbing, interestingly. And I remember at the time I had a counselor who was amazing. And she even back then, I don't know how long ago we're talking now, maybe 20 years ago, gosh, that she talked about depression as being pressed down. And the image that came to mind for me was a jack in a box, where you're, an old-fashioned jack in a box, you're kind of up like this, and then you press it down and put the lid on top. And that's, in a way, what I did to manage. And B and I were talking recently, and I don't know where she'd come across this article, but in Shona, which is one of the Zimbabwean languages, there's a word, and I'm not even sure I'm going to say it right. It's like kufung izisa, which means, it's their word for depression. The direct translation is thinking too much. And I love that. That makes so much sense. So that was my kind of then. And what I now see, which is so different, is that I still get low days. Of course I do. I mean, yesterday I cried most of the day. And I've come out of a period, short few days of feeling just low and out of sorts. But I don't get frightened by it anymore. And that's the most massive difference for me. That it just doesn't scare me. Of course it's uncomfortable, and of course I'd prefer it were different, but I'm not frightened by it now. I don't feel I need to do anything to make it go away. And what I see is that these feelings of overwhelm that I get are like signposts, kind of a warning sign, if you like, notifying me that my thinking is revving up, and that I'm overheating, a bit like an old computer. And I know then that actually that's the warning sign to slow down, to just be gentle, to kind of go with it, if you like. And one of the things, I was reading a book, Rising Strong by Brene Brown. I don't know whether you've read it. I was reading it yesterday evening, and you know, when you're scanning a book and then suddenly some words jump out at you, and it was like suddenly I came to a grinding halt, because what she said was, in my head, I'm already 3 miles ahead of my body. And I stopped and I thought, oh my goodness, that's exactly what we do. That's exactly what I do. I'm already a week, a month, a year ahead in my overwhelming feelings or stressful thinking. And that's what we do, don't we? So it just, for me, that was such a beautiful reminder of coming back into my body, into the present moment, and into the now. So that's my kind of bit on it, which I'm sure we can, hopefully you'll have questions on it. So what we're going to do now, how are we for time? I'm going to open up the chat, I think, now. And while let me just do that. So while you're thinking of questions, and please feel free to write whatever comes to mind. They might be just insights you've had, there might be direct questions, whatever comes to mind, please do write in the chat so we can start having a discussion about it. But what I'm going to do is just hand back to Natalie and to Bea, because there are a couple of things that we've learned, the four of us have learned, that we want to share about the kind of the two key things that we've learned about navigating stress and anxiety now, which makes life a whole lot easier. Natalie.
Yeah, I loved what you shared, and every time we have our conversations, it's just, you know, it all resonates. And the first thing that we really wanted you to for you to kind of try and understand is that we don't need to be scared of our feelings. We don't need to fix them. We don't need to change them. Our human experience is made of feelings. We're feeling beings, and innocently we have said some are acceptable and good, and some are you know, and some are bad, and what's that innocently done leads us to get into habits where we become scared of our experience and scared of the big feelings we feel, just like Rebecca was talking about when she was, you know, scared of the tsunami. And we resist. We can typically resist, and what that resistance does is it innocently prolongs that feeling, because we kind of don't let it move through us. The feelings left to their own devices will move through us. It's almost like the design, and when it moves through, something fresh comes in its way, and we don't need to be scared, we don't need to fix. So there's a piece around acknowledging our feelings, accepting them, and kind of allowing them in. And when we do that, we will discover they're not as scary as we thought. And you know, just like Bea said as well, the minute she kind of realized she didn't have to be scared like that, they seem to dissolve, whereas the resistance sort of exacerbates and accentuates them. So that's the first thing about really seeing you don't need to be scared, and you don't need to fix any of these feelings. And none of them are right, and none of them are wrong. Just is. And B, what was your second thing we wanted to leave people to leave with?
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. I love that. I think that's so important, because I think we're so often told to cheer up or stop crying or calm down or whatever it is, to avoid all of those sort of negative emotions, but actually allowing ourselves to feel it all is so important. So the second one was that we landed on was that nothing has to change out there for us to feel different. And what we mean by this is that it's not the situation or the person or the thing someone said that makes us feel stressed or anxious, but actually it's our thinking and interpretation about those things that do. And Natalie, you spoke a bit about this earlier, that actually we're experiencing life through our own lenses and our filters that are shaped by what's going on in our head. It's kind of how I think about this all the time, that how like 10 people at work can be in the same meeting, and yet every single one of them will have a completely different experience of that same meeting. Or how on some days when it's chucking it down with rain and it's really stormy outside, that I can feel really low and anxious. And then on other days when the weather's exactly the same, I can feel totally content. So it's not the weather that's actually making me feel like that, it's just my kind of thinking in the moment. But I think we're so often brought up to think it's the other way around, and it's kind of reinforced by everything around us. I mean, advertising, we're kind of bombarded with it, that if you buy this thing or change your lifestyle, then you'll feel better. So I think we then tend to avoid the thing that we think is causing us stress and anxiety. So like for me, as I said earlier, it was the meeting or the presentation, or for others it might be, I don't know, the in-laws or public transport or whatever it might be. Or we either kind of avoid it, or we try to numb it. So like Natalie, you were just saying now, we try and fix or numb that feeling when it does come along. And that might look like antidepressants or alcohol or exercise. So for me, kind of knowing that it's only ever our minds creating that experience means that firstly, we're not at the mercy of our circumstances. And secondly, that we don't have to avoid those situations or the people or the things to feel different. So now in those moments, I can see that, I mean, I feel like a broken record saying this again, but I know I don't have to bleed my thinking. And I can also just allow myself to feel whatever feelings show up without being afraid of them. And for me, like those two things, those two lessons that we've just talked about, have been so transformative. And they might seem really, really obvious to some people, or they might seem just completely the opposite to what others are thinking and seeing. And I guess that's okay. I think as Natalie said at the start, just kind of keeping an open mind, and we like to say what if a lot. So actually, if you're kind of sitting there, and this was me a few years ago, if you're sitting there thinking that's a load of rubbish, then like, what if it wasn't? What if actually there could be something in some of the words that we're sharing that might actually be helpful in some way? So that's me. Rachel, are you going to have a go at rounding up some of these questions?
I am, and excuse me, I look like I'm totally distracted over here. I'm just trying to pull some themes out of all of this wonderful stuff that you're sharing. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I'm just going to start coming at you, ladies, and keep an eye on the chat myself. So keep it all coming. It's wonderful. Sarah's asking and talking about how Brené Brown often talks about the stories that we tell ourselves when we kind of feel those negative feelings and we're feeling like we're going to get overwhelmed. And she's asking us, you know, what stories are we telling ourselves so that we can not become overwhelmed? Are there any things that we're saying to ourselves to avoid that feeling taking over?
Who's going to start? Natalie, go.
I guess I'm reluctant to add a further story, but what has been massively powerful for me is
did we lose?
Sorry,
you okay? Carry on.
Keep going, Nat.
Yeah. Yeah, just knowing that because I know that it's all coming from my thinking in the moment, and sometimes I forget this, you know, sometimes the thoughts and the stories are incredibly compelling, but when I feel the signposts that Rebecca was referring to, and for me, my experience is similar to Rachel, where I will lose my patience, or I will, you know, be a bit more snappy, or I'll feel tight-chested. When I experience that, I know that my thinking's gone a bit off track. It's a bit like if you're on a motorway and you hit the rumble strips and you know you're going off track. And in those moments, I just have seen that my thinking is less trustworthy. So it feels to me less about another story. And sorry if I've misunderstood the question a little bit, I'm realizing as I answer this, but rather just an increased awareness of my state of mind has been massively transformative in terms of just checking in with myself and keeping track of that, and sometimes I don't see it straight away, and it takes me a while to kind of come up again. But like the weather, you know, when the weather's incredibly stormy and cloudy, it will pass, and so will the stressful feelings or overwhelm. I hope that helps. I hope that answers. I don't know whether the other ladies had anything further to add on that one.
Yeah, I'll come in and I'll think, we seem to have lost Rachel. I'm assuming she's going to come back in. She's dropped out somehow. But yes, it's interesting, Sarah. So I'm just looking at the question here. What story do you tell yourself when those negative feelings threaten to overwhelm you? And in a way, it's not telling myself anything extra on top because I've already got a revved up mind. But I think it's for me, it's being really gentle with myself, and just sorry, I'm letting Rachel in as well here. I need to try and find her. Sorry.
While you're doing that, just to add, what I was going to say was that firstly, it's okay for all these negative feelings to overwhelm you. It's okay to kind of see that tsunami coming and kind of dive straight into it, or just kind of stand there and let it kind of crash over you, even though it might feel totally scary and uncomfortable. But also that what I found is that as I've got into more of a routine of allowing myself to feel everything, that actually I tend to feel overwhelmed less, because it's almost like when we try and like Mum, you're using the Jack in the Box analogy, that actually if we're trying to keep everything in the box and then it suddenly kind of jumps out, that's where the overwhelm comes from, in my experience. So actually, if we just kind of leave the lid open all the time and just allow ourselves to kind of feel everything like that, then there's going to be less of this. And again, that's kind of what I've experienced, that actually it kind of self-regulates in a way, that actually from my own personal experience, that I've felt less of that build up, as it were, because I'm letting it kind of come and go as it pleases.
I love that, Bea, and there's a lot of Bea and I do a lot of work together with people with eating disorders, and one of the things that we talk about is acknowledging how we're feeling. So just being able to say, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. Somehow there's an acknowledgement in it. Just saying it actually doesn't make it even bigger, it somehow diffuses it. And one of the things that we talk about, and we do talk a lot in metaphor, because it just seems to, well, it paints a picture in a way which is sometimes easier for us to understand, but Bea and I often talk about leaving the front and back door open so that all the feelings can come in and go and have a way out, rather than having the back door shut so that they're just going round and round and round. And the chances are then that they just ignite. So it's seeing that we are going to have, you know, and again, it's never binary. It's not good feelings and negative feelings. We get everything, and we're judging some as being, I don't want those ones. I will have those ones, but I don't want those ones. But it's kind of accepting it all, and sometimes we've just got to do whatever feels right to put our head down into the storm, and just know that our resilience is always there, reliable, and that we will bounce back from it. Rachel, are you with us?
I am back. I have no idea what happened. The internet just had a moment, so cheers to that. Thank you, Virgin. So quite a few questions came in around how do you stop yourself from distracting yourself? So yes, I put my head down and ride this out. Yes, I know that I need to feel the range of feelings, but how do you, on those days, how do you stop yourself from trying to distract and bury? And I guess, another question which links nicely to that is, it's easy for us to think that on days where we feel quite emotionally level, let's say, that we can go, oh, that thinking, I might be overreacting here. Or, in my own case, I might make one sarcastic comment and go, not a great day for Rach. Don't worry, I'll just see myself through this day and, kind of move on quite quickly. So on the days where we're having much more low moods, and maybe it's hormonal, maybe it's cyclical, what are the ways through? Or is it really, hunker down and just sit through it? So how do we stop ourselves distracting? And is there a way through it? Do we just need to ride it out?
I might come in on the how do you stop self-distracting, and also Rachel, you're very welcome to answer these questions as well.
Yes, we'll chip in.
So on not distracting, I think what we all do, or what we have done, is we get into habits of how we deal with these feelings. So like for me, so I had an eating disorder when I was younger, and I would have all sorts of coping mechanisms that would help me to distract myself, or help kind of numb how I was feeling. And that was all habit, because I did it for a long time and I did it all the time, and that was just kind of my entire world. So I think for me, part of it was about kind of breaking that habit, and actually just seeing that I didn't have to do those things anymore. But I think also what we're not saying is that we have to kind of sit on the sofa or kind of just stay in our house and just kind of do absolutely nothing and just wait for it to pass. But actually kind of just tuning into what feels right to do at that moment. And that might be to go out for a walk, or it might be to bake, or it might be to, I don't know, do whatever. But it's, what I've seen is that it's kind of the difference between that habitual kind of knee-jerk reaction to numb and distract that we're used to and aren't even kind of aware of, versus what feels right in that moment, if that makes sense. So it's, I guess it's the difference between what's going on up here and what's kind of going on in here, that kind of gut feeling of actually, yeah, I need some fresh air now, rather than kind of even kind of that kind of subconscious, I really need a glass of wine. That kind of, without even thinking of it, this is what I need to do. So that I don't know if any of that makes sense, or if any of the others have anything to add to that, but that's what I've seen around that.
The other thing, just briefly, is again, it's getting comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, which is like, oh no, don't make me do that. But actually, who said that life had to be, you know, nirvana all the time? It's, and I'm not, you know, being dismissive in this, but it is, we're kind of taught that we, you know, not to feel those feelings, not to feel what we might call negative feelings. But actually that's all part of, in a way, the richness of the human experience, is we get to feel it all. And we've just labeled one as good and one as bad. So if we can get used to the feeling of being uncomfortable, then that really helps. And Eckhart Tolle just comes to mind, where he says, what we resist persists. Yeah, absolutely. So the more we resist the negative, in inverted commas, feelings, the more they're going to hang around. Whereas if we can go, yeah, I feel rubbish, or I hate this feeling, it's just acknowledging that, getting okay with being uncomfortable.
That's been massive for me. Just, I used to always avoid feeling uncomfortable and not do things that felt uncomfortable, and was continually sabotaging my own efforts in the world because things felt uncomfortable. And when I learned that it was okay to feel uncomfortable, I didn't need to be scared of it, and I could still do what I needed to do, and the uncomfortable feelings weren't telling me about anything about my capability to do stuff in the world and contribute. They were only a reflection of my state of mind in the moment. And now I know if I'm a 2 out of 10 and I feel like I'm a 2 out of 10, that's okay, I'm a 2 out of 10. But I can still move forward and do what I need to do. And before I know it, I'll be on my way to a 3. And knowing that, seeing that is massively powerful.
I had one short work example where I built up in my head that I was about to deliver something really important for a really impressive client. And I remember stood in front of this room where I had probably about 40 or 50 people in the room in front of me. And it was my first time delivering this kind of training session. So I was very nervous. And as I stood up to introduce myself and to start the day, I realized at that split second that it was almost like the 2-year anniversary since I lost my mum. And my head, heart, gut, everything just went, oh, I'd really love to just go and lie down now and have a good cry and get into bed and snuggle down and just, I cannot believe where I'm standing professionally. And I felt so uncomfortable, and it all kind of clicked into place that, well, I'll just start, I'll say hello, I'll start performing in the role. It's not insincere or not genuine. It's just I can't go and get into bed right now. However, I don't have to be all singing and dancing right now either. So I'll just meet the room authentically, which meant I was quieter and softer. And I launched the thing, I said hello, and I set everybody off on whatever they were supposed to be doing. And then just sat with that feeling of discomfort for the day. and then got home and had a good cry. So it was quite a lovely example to go, I can still do these things even if I'm feeling totally rubbish. I didn't run from the feeling, I just sat in it and was still able to do my stuff. That was a big learning. That's helpful.
And that feels so different to the, as I said earlier, the kind of white knuckling your way through something.
Yeah.
Actually, it was kind of what I see in that is that you've seen this kind of overwhelming feeling, kind of said hello to it, slightly kind of allowed it to take up a bit of space in your mind, but actually just allow things to unfold, rather than kind of, I think we try and shut those things out and shut it down, and I'll deal with that later, or never.
Yeah.
But actually that kind of lack of force feels so much more, or so much less effort and painful, I feel.
Yeah, just kind of let it wash over you, kind of be with it.
Yeah. What was the second question?
Well, I'm having a look here. We've got another, I think we can get through another couple, so keep them coming. I will note them, and whatever we don't get to, we will find a way of answering. But a great question from Janet, and I think we can all relate to this. So overthinking. So I overthink, and for situations that are stressful, that cause me stress, I often play out imaginary conversations in my head. We all do. I mean, it's hugely relatable. How do I manage these situations?
Janet, thank you. I can see you right there. Yes. So the key word in there is the conversation is imaginary. It's not real. And that's it. It's when we see that it's, oh my goodness, we do it all the time. I do it all the time as well. I run these conversations and then suddenly it's like, oh, what the hell am I doing here? And it's just seeing that that's exactly what it is. It's an illusion. It's the amazing brain that we've got that sometimes can work with us and sometimes it work against us. But it's knowing that actually the only thing to do in that moment is to go, I'm telling a story here. I wrote a blog a while ago, and it was entitled The Unreliable Narrator. And I pinched that from somebody called Michael Neal. But yeah, it's an unreliable narrator. It's not to be taken literally or seriously. And I think that, I mean, in a way, that's all I'd say, is that there's nothing to do. There's no managing needed in this. It's just knowing, seeing that that's what's going on. That's what's really happening, is that it's imaginary. And how awesome are we that we can do that?
I think it's in that noticing where I think, like, for me, that's been so helpful, that like it's taken like practice and we still get caught up. We're not the kind of the gurus here, but actually it's just getting into the kind of the habit of just being aware of how the system works, and actually just noticing when our thinking's going a bit kind of off track, and also having fun with it. Like, Mum, did you used to have like a picture on your wall or something, like a poster that said like, "Whoa there, cowboy"? Yeah,
that was something that you said to me, so I printed it off in this thing and put it on the wall, because she, B and I obviously have a very close relationship, and she can, say it as it is to me. And I was getting carried away with who knows what, and she just, put her hand up. We were on a call like this, and she went, "Just whoa there, cowboy." And it just made me laugh so much that I actually had it printed off as a reminder. So yeah, let's be playful in this. We don't be serious.
Yeah, I mean, I think we take it all. I mean, we all take life so seriously. so seriously. And sometimes, particularly when we're feeling anxious, stressed, overwhelmed, it can feel really heavy as well. So actually, like, why not look for the humor and the lightheartedness where we can? That actually, instead of noticing that you're kind of creating this story and conversation in your head and then judging yourself and beating yourself up for doing that, that actually kind of rolling your eyes and thinking, oh, here I go again. Yeah. So actually kind of being forgiving about it and just accepting that that's what we all do.
I think when we get caught up in our stress and overthinking, it's really easy to go down this rabbit hole where we're trying to imagine all the potential what if scenarios, and we get into habits innocently of leaning into these problems, and the more we lean in, the more we feel stuck. The more we lean in, the more we narrow our viewpoint, and it's in the awareness that our thinking might be off track, and looking out for these signposts, we can be more aware in the moment. And when we become more aware, it's like we can zoom out a bit and see the bigger picture. And for all the imaginary conversations, and me too, we just add more swirl and add more noise to the thinking, and we forget that in the moment when we actually are with the person we need to have a conversation with, if we can come fresh to that conversation with less story, our wisdom will show up. We'll be more resourceful in the moment if we can come to it from a place where we've zoomed out a bit. It is tricky. We get into habits, but what we're pointing to is just noticing a bit more what's going on for us and what our state of mind is like in any moment, and being a bit more accepting of that, and knowing we can easily go off track.
I've had a couple of last comments because I'm going to wrap us up and hand us over to Rebecca in a minute. But one question here is, often I don't see what the real issue is. I just get overwhelmed or feel angry or frustrated, and it's not necessarily that my partner didn't hang up the washing, it's not necessarily that my child spilt them, whatever it is, I just want to explode. So how do I don't always know what the real issue is, so I don't know what I'm supposed to do. B.
So I felt like this exact thing a few days ago, and I was really, really confused by it. I was feeling really, really just anxious and low, and I had no idea why. Nothing had happened. It was just kind of a normal day, and I just felt everything. And what I did was, at first I tried to figure out why I was feeling like that, kind of digging around and looking backwards at what had happened earlier that day. Was it something my boyfriend said that I had then kind of internalized and now is making me feel this way? And kind of going down a bit of a rabbit hole. But then I caught myself and actually realized that I didn't need a reason. That even though it was really confusing that I didn't know why I was feeling this way, that actually, like, that was okay. That sometimes these feelings can come out of the blue, come out of absolutely nowhere and kind of smack us in the face, and we have got no idea why. And it kind of just made me realize in that moment that actually we don't need to figure it out. We don't need to find a reason to pin it on or find someone to blame for it. That actually, as we've been saying this evening, that actually we can just let ourselves feel it, and then it will pass on its own. So I just wanted to share that because that's quite a recent experience of mine.
That's lovely. Thank you, B. we have one more, which I think is also, well, they're all useful. My goodness, I can't judge. Not that I should or need to. This one I love. So and in interest of time, I wonder if we can just hear kind of one thing from the four of us, because the question is, how do we help others? So when other people are struggling, or is there any advice around, how we can help others when they're under pressure or feeling stressed, especially when you're working with different types of people who experience all the different types of situations in different ways? My view, my first reaction was acknowledgement. So for me, when I'm sitting with anyone ever, including myself, who's feeling overwhelmed or stressed in any way, I sit there too, or I stay there if it's me, as best as I can. So yes, you're feeling a bit rubbish, or I'm feeling a bit rubbish. I get it. I hear you. I acknowledge it. That's the most useful thing I've found. Ladies?
Yeah, that's such a good thing. Acknowledgement, and actually just holding a space for someone.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. So whatever that might look like, and not, well, I guess this is maybe a second one, but it's the not trying to jump in and fix it. So literally just, yeah, I see you kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm, invariably quite a lot of my coaching conversations at the moment, the person I'm with is, is feeling very overwhelmed with the current situation and everything they're handling. And I guess I would echo that kind of acknowledgement and really listening, because we can't understand what it's like for anyone else, and I think that the line has been going, we're all in the same storm but in different boats. So just trying to come as open as possible to the conversation and listening to what shows up. I think if we can help other people notice the point that their thinking maybe plays, all the things we've been speaking about, and I like to think about, if we concentrate on what is known, if we concentrate on what is in front of us, we're kind of built for reality and we can handle that. But all this, and it is tricky, these are uncertain times and the rug's been pulled out from under us, and we're used to, one would argue it's not always certain anyway, but it feels particularly uncertain at the moment. And just acknowledging that, but also in that, what do we know to be true, and what might have we have innocently added that we can kind of remove?
I think for me, it was the thing that came into my head was the point that has already been raised about not trying to jump in and fix it. I think we all like to try and fix things for other people because it feels helpful, but actually, yeah, holding that space for someone is, I find, is kind of one of the most helpful things to do. And kind of similar to what you were just saying, Natalie, about helping to point to what's actually true in the right moments, when it's not kind of, people aren't kind of upset, in the right moment with the right people. I like to ask the question, how much of what you're thinking right now is actually true? Which obviously isn't always going to go down well in every situation, so I wouldn't necessarily kind of advise that for everyone. But I think I usually use that on Mum, actually.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Lovely.
So that seems like an appropriate time to stop now, I think, doesn't it? So we just want to say, I'm going to put it on gallery view so I can see lots of people. That we just want to say a massive, massive, massive thank you. It feels such an honor to actually be in your living room right now, sharing what we have learned about stress, anxiety and overwhelm, and how different our lives are now as a result of what we've seen. And we would just want to share that. You know, we share it with our clients, and we just want to be able to share that with as many people as possible. And 4 Women, 4 Decades kind of only came together as if you were on the call last time, just the 4 of us in conversation and let's do this thing. So this is unfolding. But our plan at the moment is that we offer once a month a call like this, which is guided from you, because this was the subject that came up tops in our Facebook group, Facebook page. So come back to us and tell us what other subjects are of interest to you that you want to know more about. And then we're thinking as well of maybe, you know, there is so much more that the 4 of us can share on this subject alone of stress, anxiety and overwhelm. So what we're looking at is maybe doing a deeper dive over 4 weeks and a small fee for that, whatever. So again, it's bear with us. We're unfolding as this is happening. So that's it really from us. We've recorded this evening. You'll be getting an email from us tomorrow at some point with a recording and also a link to join our Facebook group. I've been overwhelmed with the amount of engagement already there, which is wonderful. There's clearly a hunger for a connection. And I think that's it. Ladies, is there anything else? Have I missed out anything?
I think so.
No. Okay, so I am going to see if I can unmute everyone. There you go. So you are free to just all say goodbye to each other. Thank you so much for your hour this evening.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. See you again soon.
Take care.
Bye.